Good evening, class. Getting back to our read aloud, Lois Lowry's Number of the Stars. We're on chapter 5, which is called Who is the Dark Haired One? After you listen to me do the read aloud on our Google Classroom, I would like you to go to the Google Documents and grab the appropriate questions and respond to them. Don't forget to use full sentences. So, chapter 5, Who is the Dark Haired One? Do you really think anyone will come? Ellen asked nervously, turning to Anne-Marie in the bedroom. Your father doesn't think so. Of course not. They're always threatening stuff. They just like to scare people. Anne-Marie took her nightgown from a hook in the closet. Anyway, if they did, it would give me a chance to practice acting. I'd just pretend to be Lise. I wish I were taller, though. Ellen stood on tiptoe, trying to make herself tall. She laughed at herself, and her voice was more relaxed. You were great as the Dark Queen in the school play last year, Anne-Marie told her. You should be an actress when you grow up. My father wants me to be a teacher. He wants everyone to be a teacher like him, but maybe I could convince him that I should go to acting school. Ellen stood on tiptoe again and made an impetuous gesture with her arm. I am the Dark Queen, she intoned. I have come to command the night. You should try saying, I am Lise Johansson, Anne-Marie said, grinning. If you told the Nazis that you were the Dark Queen, they'd haul you off and chuck you in a mental institution. Ellen dropped her actress pose and sat down with her legs curled under her on the bed. They won't really come, do you think? She asked. Anne-Marie shook her head. Not in a million billion years. She picked up her hairbrush. The girls found themselves whispering as they got ready for bed. There was no need really to whisper. They were, after all, supposed to be normal sisters, and Papa had said they could giggle and talk. The bedroom door was closed. But the night did seem somehow different from the normal night, and so they whispered. How did your sister die, Anne-Marie? Ellen said suddenly. I remember when it happened, and I remember the funeral. It was the only time I've ever been in a Lutheran church, but I never knew what happened. I don't know exactly, Anne-Marie confessed. She and Peter were out somewhere together, and then there was a telephone call, and then they had been at the hospital, and Mama and Papa said there'd been an accident. Your mother came and stayed with me and Christy. Christy was already asleep, and she slept right through everything. She was so little then. But I stayed up, and I was with your mother in the living room when my parents came home in the middle of the night, and they told me Lise had died. I remember it was raining, Ellen said sadly. It was still raining the next morning when Mama told me. Mama was crying, and the rain made it seem as if the whole world was crying. Anne-Marie finished brushing her long hair and handed her hairbrush to her best friend. Ellen undid her braids, lifted her dark hair away from the thin gold chain she wore around her neck. This chain held the Star of David, and she began to brush her curls. I think it was partly because of the rain. They say she was hit by a car. I suppose the streets were slippery and it was getting dark, and maybe the driver couldn't see. Papa, he looked so angry. He made one hand into a fist and he kept pounding it in the other hand. I remember the noise of it. Slam, slam, slam. Together, they got into a wide bed and pulled up the covers. Anne-Marie blew out the candle and drew the curtains aside so that the open window near the bed would let in some air. See that blue trunk in the corner? Lots of Liz's things in there, even her wedding dress. Mama and Papa have never looked at those things, not since the day they packed them away. Ellen sighed. She would have looked so beautiful in her wedding dress. She had such a pretty smile. I used to pretend that she was my sister, too. She would have liked that, Anne-Marie said. She loved you. That's the worst thing in the world, Ellen whispered, to be dead so young. I wouldn't want the Germans to take my family away, to make us live someplace else, but still, it wouldn't be as bad as being dead. Anne-Marie leaned over. They won't take you away, not your parents either. Papa promised that they were safe, and he always keeps his promises, and you are quite safe here with us. And for a while they continued to murmur in the dark. But the murmurs were interrupted by yawns. And then Ellen's voice stopped, and she turned over, and in a minute, she was breathing slowly. Anne-Marie stared at the window where the sky was outlined and the tree branch moved slightly in the breeze. Everything seemed very familiar, very comforting. Dangers were no more than odd imaginings, like ghost stories that children made up to frighten one another. Things that couldn't possibly happen, and Anne-Marie felt completely safe here in her own room. It was hours later, but still dark, when she was awakened abruptly by pounding on the apartment door. Anne-Marie eased the bedroom door open quietly. peeked out. Behind her, Ellen was sitting up, eyes wide. She could see Mama and Papa in their night clothes moving about. Mama lit a candle. But as Anne-Marie watched, she went to the lamp and switched it on. It was so long a time since they had dared to use the strictly rationed electricity after dark that the light in the room seemed startling. Papa opened the door. "This is the Johansson apartment?" a deep voice asked. It was terribly accented Danish. "Our name is on the door, and I see you have a flashlight. What do you want? Is there something wrong? I understand you are a friend of your neighbors, the Rosens, Mrs. Johansson," the soldier said, rather angrily. "Sophie Rosen is my friend, that's true," said Mama. "Please, could you speak more quietly? My children are asleep." "Then you will be so kind as to tell me where the Rosens are." He made no attempt to lower his voice. "I assume they're probably at home sleeping. It's 4 a.m, said Mother. Anne-Marie heard the soldier stalk across the living room towards the kitchen. From her hiding place in the narrow sliver of the doorway, she could see that he had a holstered pistol at his waist and was wearing a German uniform. Then another German said, "The Rosens' apartment is empty. We are wondering if they might be visiting their good friends, the Johanssons." "Well," said Papa, moving slightly so that he was standing in front of Anne-Marie's bedroom door, "there is no one here but my family." "Then you won't have a problem if I look around," said the voice. It wasn't a question. "Seems I don't have a choice," said Papa. "Please don't wake my children. There's no need to frighten the little kids." The heavy booted feet moved across the floor. The closet door opened and closed with a bang. Ellen, said Anne-Marie, "take your necklace off, quick." "I can't get it open," said Ellen. "I never take it off. I don't even remember how it opens." Anne-Marie heard a voice. "What is this here?" Shh. "That's my daughter's bedroom. They're sound asleep," said my mother. "Hold still," said Anne-Marie. "This is going to hurt." And she grabbed the gold chain and yanked with all her strength, and it broke. The door opened. The room was flooded in light. She crumpled her hand and closed her fingers tightly and stared with terror at 3 Nazi officers who entered the room. One of the men aimed a flashlight around the bedroom. He went to the closet. He looked inside. Then, with a sweep of his gloved hand, he pushed to the floor several coats and a bathrobe. There was nothing in there. Nothing except the chest of drawers and the trunk piled high with Christie's dolls. Angrily, he put the flashlight around. "Get up! Come over here!" Trembling, the 2 girls rose from the bed and followed him, brushing past the 2 remaining officers in the doorway. These 3 uniformed men were different from the ones in the street. Street soldiers were young, sometimes ill at ease. Anne-Marie remembered how the giraffe had, for a moment, let his harsh pose slip, and he'd even smiled at Christie. But not these. They were older, and their faces were angry. Her parents were standing beside each other. Thank goodness that Christie slept through almost everything. If they had wakened her, she'd be crying, or worse, she'd get angry and get her fists flying. "Your names," said the officer. "Anne-Marie Johansson, and this is my sister." "Quiet! Let her speak for herself. Your name, girl," he said. Lise Johansson?" The officer stared at them grimly. "Now," said Mother, "you have seen that we are not hiding anything. May my kids go back to sleep." The officer ignored her. He grabbed a handful of Ellen's hair. She winced, and he laughed. "You have a blonde child sleeping in the other room. You have a blonde daughter. Where did you get this dark-haired child? From a different dad? Was her dad the milkman?" Papa stepped forward. "Don't you dare speak to my wife like that. Let go of my daughter. I'll report you." "Or maybe you got her someplace else. Like perhaps the Rosens' house?" For a moment, no one spoke. Then Anne-Marie, watching in panic, saw her father move swiftly to the small bookcase. She saw that he was holding the family photograph album. Very quickly, he searched through the pages and found what he was looking for. He tore out 3 pictures from 3 separate pages. He handed them to the German officer. He let go of Ellen's hair. "You will see each of my daughters, each with a name written on the photograph." The album had snapshots, all poorly focused pictures of school events and birthday parties, but it also contained a portrait taken by a professional photographer of each girl when they were just a baby. And at the bottom of each picture were their names. She realized, too, with an icy feeling, why Papa had torn the pages from the book. At the bottom of each page below the photograph was written the date. The real Liz Johansson had been born 21 years ago. Kristen Elizabeth, he let the photograph drop. Anne-Marie, dropped the photo. Liz Marguerite. In her mind, Anne-Marie pictured the photograph that he held, the baby wide-eyed, silver teething ring, bare feet, the wispy curls, the dark hair. The officer grabbed the photograph. He ripped it in half and threw the pieces on the floor. Then he ground them into the floor with the heels of his shiny boots. Without another word, the two officers followed behind him as they all exited the apartment. Papa stepped forward and locked the door. Anne-Marie relaxed. Her clenched fingers of her right hand were still clutching Ellen's necklace. She looked down and saw she'd been squeezing so hard that the Star of David was now imprinted on the palm of her hand. All right, so don't forget to answer the questions. If you need to hear the story again, watch the video.